And welcome back. Well, our next guest says that we don't have a diversity problem, we have people problems. Joining me now is Risha Grant. She's an international award-winning diversity and inclusion speaker. And today she's here to discuss raising your kids without unconscious bias. Wouldn't that be great? Good morning to you, Risha.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to chat with you because I think this is such an important topic. Before we kind of get into some of it, I just want you to explain what unconscious bias is, because I think it's a buzzword a lot of people are hearing, but they're not always familiar with what it means.
It basically means that our brains work on autopilot for a lot of different things. You know, there are times when we drive home or drive to work and we don't remember how we got there. We just look up and we're there, right? That's our brain on autopilot. Well, with unconscious bias, how our brains communicate, they communicate between brain cells. And usually that happens in one direction. That's the same way that I see our biases. They happen in one direction too. That direction is negative. So unconscious bias is an unrecognizable part of our upbringing. It is us living through the past pains and experiences of the people who raised us. So the things that they dealt with, they raise us so that we don't deal with those same things. It happened with me with my grandmother. You know, born in 1923, Oklahoma, as a Black woman, she wanted to make sure that I knew how to navigate the world in a way that would give me the best quality of life. But in doing that, I learned a bias of a mistrust of white people.
Well, I think that's important that you admit that and that we all talk about it, because we've all are a product of the way we grew up, no matter if we like it or we don't like it. And there's a lot of work to be done. And so I think a lot of parents will say, well, what do I do? How can I get rid of this unconscious bias if, again, I'm almost unaware I have it? And how can I make sure I don't pass it on to my children? Exactly,
because our children, they're watching us. You know, we're that example. And if you don't have any friends of different races that fall into different diverse categories, maybe they're gay, lesbian, what, you don't have any friends like that, neither will your kids, most likely. So one of the things you can do is make sure that they have friends that are different. Make sure that you talk to them about racism, and not just racism, but the effects of racism, what it has done to different people, especially African Americans here in the United States. It's really important that we have those conversations as early as possible. But we have got to realize that our kids are listening to us. You know, I've had to go in and do emergency training for kids as young as middle school, 12 and 13 years old. Those kids are hearing those things at home. So if you have to read to them, don't be scared to share with them the real effects of racism, if that's how you have to have that conversation, because studies show that when parents really talk about it, kids have a different experience about it. But alternatively, if someone does something to offend you of a different race and you're really upset about that, and the way that you talk about it could really set how it is that your kids feel about an entire group of people.
That's so true, because oftentimes I think it's very true that people don't always hear what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. So even just that feeling that they get, whether, you know, how you're saying something can resonate inside a child or someone you're with. You know, I think so many people are just afraid to say the wrong thing because we don't always say the right things, even when intentions are good. So my guess is you would say, as somebody who's been a diversity trainer, that it's more important to have the conversation than to not.
Oh, yes, definitely. Because, look, we're just having conversations. I mean, for a lot of people, they're just having conversations. The companies that I work with, they're really interested in the conversation, and as important as the conversation is, the action is just as important, because for the segment of people who fall into a diverse category, especially Black folks and people of color, they've been having this conversation since they were born. So while it seems like things are moving really fast for a lot of people, there's a huge segment that is moving extremely slow for. So yes, have the conversation, but have action. So that way everybody is learning, everybody is gaining. We've got to change this to equity. That's the word that we need to be practicing and saying, is how do we become equitable so that everybody has the same opportunities?
That's very true. That's a word that we train with on at the station here as well. And it takes talking about it, it takes seeing it, takes learning about it to make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward. But how can we get rid of? Is the key then the conversation, the How do we get rid of that unconscious bias if it's there?
We have to confront it. There's no other way. You need to identify it, own it, confront it. Those are my 3 steps. Figure out who makes you uncomfortable and why. Ask yourself questions. You know, I usually give an example of sitting in an airplane. They've announced that the airplane's completely full, but that middle seat next to you is open. Who don't you want to sit there? And we all do it. We all do it. We're like, oh my gosh, please don't sit here. Please don't sit here. You know, if that person is obese, we don't want to sit next to him. If that person has a kid strapped to them, we don't want to sit next to them. If their pants are sagging, if they have a turban or a hijab, there's all these reasons. And when you begin to ask yourself, why don't I want to sit next to this person? You begin a deeper dive into why they make you uncomfortable. And as you begin to assess, wow, I probably have a bias against this person, that's the perfect time to strike up conversation and to begin to break down those barriers, because you'll notice that most people are just like you. We have so many similarities, and something as crazy as skin color to separate us really sounds crazy, because it is. You know, race is a social construct that we have decided to make into a really big deal that makes people feel less valued and feel less than who they are.
And I believe everybody deserves to be the best version of themselves and have that equity as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Risha. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you your website. It's rishagrant.com. People can find you on social media as well.